And we're live with our 180th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky, joined by my co-host from Las Vegas, Nevada, Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, do your thing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode, number 180. Feels rather momentous. We're getting up there. I obviously brought to you from sunny, hot Las Vegas and somehow muggy. It's been, kind of strange, but I'm here for DEF CON and for the week and in preparations for our trainings on Monday and Tuesday. Practical Secure Code Review with Seth and Ken is going to be off the hook. Otherwise, come find me. If you are going to the villages during DEF CON and you're in town, stop by the info booth there. I'll be there in the mornings until about 1 or 2 p.m. At the booth, helping do the Hacker Tracker scheduling stuff and helping out the info team, the info goon team. So I will have stickers. I only brought a couple of shirts because I had, I flew, so I didn't have a lot of storage. So, it's kind of first come, first serve as far as the shirt goes that I have. Otherwise, I do have stickers and other stuff. Would love to catch up. I was thinking I was going to stop by the Crocs store while I'm here, Ken. Pick up some Crocs to wear.
Make sure you get some bright white socks to go with it.
Exactly. Yeah, either bright white or black or deep black. One of the two, right?
I have shirts and I just realized I have them, but since I'm coming in Sunday after probably everybody's leaving or the day that most people are probably leaving, it's I can't really hand them out. Should I bring? I mean, I can bring them. Nah.
Yeah, okay. If you wanted to bring a couple, but I don't think it. We're sending them out, right? So if people would like a shirt and some swag, we're more than happy to ship that to our listeners. So hit us up, join the Slack channel and hit me up. I've got a stack of 5 or 6 that are ready to go out this next week or as soon as I get around to it when I get back. So if you don't get one from me in Vegas, don't despair. We will be able to ship you one. Let's see what else is going on. I don't know. Ken, have you been paying attention to, any of the Black Hat talks or anything that's coming up? I know you've been super busy work-wise, so it surprised
I've been
me.
Swamped. Unfortunately,
I was going to say, I know James Kettle, Albino Wax on Twitter, is speaking right now on browser side HTTP smuggling or whatever it is, right? Somehow targeting browsers to do some of the request smuggling. So it should be interesting to see what that research is when he actually posts it. Since obviously we're not in the talk. So there's a new iteration.
So this is using other victim browsers to test request smuggling or to perform request smuggling, maybe?
I think so, just kind of based on what he's intimated. I know I was looking at his Twitter earlier today. And he was posting some things about the demo and how it may or may not work on the Black Hat Wi-Fi, because of course it may or may not work on the Black Hat Wi-Fi. How to turn their victim's browser into a desync delivery platform. So I wonder if they're using some sort of cross-site scripting. I mean, obviously cross-site scripting, JavaScript attacks, something along those lines to do request smuggling through a browser, a victim browser. We'll see. I'm sure it'll be interesting. They always do good work over at Portswigger, and James is a good speaker. So we'll see what that one looks like. I don't know. I mean, that's the only one I've kind of been tracking. I know there's a lot of other stuff that's coming out. I haven't even looked through the AppSec Village talks. If you look at info.defcon.org, if you're online or one of the Hacker Tracker apps, they'll have it available to you, right? Let's see if I can do a search here.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in any of the new novel techniques, and obviously, but I think and actually, I guess this is a conversation that was brought up on our Slack channel, AppSec versus product security. But from a internal defender product security standpoint, the things that are always interesting are CSP bypasses or just novel new, techniques that kind of circumvent your controls that you have in place. I just use CSP as an example.
Yeah.
Sweet.
New SQL injection. I don't know. I'm kind of looking through the AppSec Village talks because there is some interesting Cypher queries, modern graph databases, and injection techniques there. That could be interesting. Agility broke AppSec. Now it's going to fix it. This is from Roy Ehrlich, Jim Manico. Yeah.
Did you say agile?
It says Agile broke AppSec. Yeah. Now it's going to fix it. I don't know. Chris Romeo's giving a talk on threat modeling. Incident response about Log4j. You probably don't need to listen to me go through this. But if you're interested, if you're going to be up there, please stop by. I'd love to see anyone that's in town. We could, if you're going to be here Sunday, let us know because Ken will be in that day, and we could, go grab drinks or something like that as a podcast, right? Yeah.
I got text. I started getting text messages last night, like, "Hey, are you here?" Or you? I'm like, I came out of training, and I was like, "Huh, okay." I forgot everybody's there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was funny. I mean, last night I saw Nathan Hamill and some of the old Fishnet crew, right, that are around.
Do you know that's probably roughly 13 years ago at this point that we worked with Nathan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. That sounds about right. 2010, 2009, 2010. We were speaking at, Black Hat and DEF CON and doing all the things. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you were actually with Nathan on stage giving a talk about iOS testing framework harness you all had built before there was anything even remotely like that. You guys were like first to score kind of with that.
First to score. It was, it was fun. And then it became a huge cat and mouse game with iOS jailbreaking and trying to get the tool to run and like all of our libraries loaded, and eventually just became too much. Right. So if you're doing iOS testing and you're doing it in an automated fashion, look at the Data Theorem guys or Corellium. There's other tools that are out there that are available, but it was an interesting time frame. Yeah. So I don't know. Vegas is always good, at least to catch up. Like I've missed the hallway con for sure. Right. This feels like the first one where it's really back and really large. I think DEF CON's going to be pretty big. Black Hat over at Mandalay Bay was large. It's going today, tomorrow as well. There's a lot of good stuff. But if you see something that's interesting to you, please hop into the Slack channel and share it, or tweet us about something that's interesting that you'd want us to talk about, because there's so much noise right now. It's really hard to pick out the interesting talks and topics if we're not sharing with each other, right? I think I have a tendency to miss quite a bit of what's going on during this week in Vegas and then have to catch up afterwards. So I know you and I both depend pretty heavily on people sharing with us or sharing what their experience was at DEF CON and Black Hat and all the security conferences, because otherwise we miss it. And sometimes the guys that are doing super interesting research don't get the credit that is due to them, because everybody goes to, James Kettle's talk, but there may be other things that are going on that are just as interesting, or maybe even more novel techniques that we need to be aware of, or would be good for us to share. Along those lines, last night at one of the parties, we were talking with a bunch of the Web3 guys, and I got into a discussion with some of the people that were on calls for the Slope Phantom wallet incident. Ken.
Is there another one? I can't even keep up with all the breaches.
No,
man.
This is the one that was a couple weeks ago where they were draining this. There was the draining of the Solana wallets that was going on. Ends up.
Was this because someone had an? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine. So they ended up draining about $8 million out of something like 5,500 different wallets, right? And the question was, okay, how's that actually happening? And so I think, the first thing I wanted to share was, what is it? Okay.
So it's not the one I was thinking. I was thinking it was maybe the one where they exposed that function externally and the bad allowed. Okay.
Nope. This is different. Okay. So here's the initial Solana developers, right? This analytics insight. I don't know. There's a number of different articles that are talking about it. But this one, you'll notice Solana said its researchers determined that private key information, so if essentially the password mnemonics in a user's crypto wallet was inadvertently transmitted to an application monitoring service, right?
Oh man.
So so I got all giddy because I was like, oh yes, all right, like we're gonna talk about logging again today.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I just could see where it was going.
I know you could.
I'm buying you Crocs at DEF CON.
I was so excited because I was talking to one of the guys that was on the incident call with Solana and Slope and Phantom, right? Like the team. And he's like, yeah. And it comes down to, so there's this OSEC.io, this Twitter thread that you see here that I just posted from OtterSec. And these guys were actually involved in the IR. And it wasn't somebody from there that I was talking to, but this was a trader. I was trying to find somewhere that they were talking about it. But the second response in there is, we have independently confirmed that Slope's mobile app sends off mnemonics via TLS to their centralized Sentry server, right? So Sentry.io is what they're using within the mobile app, and it's sending, so I don't know, like this is the whole like deserialization of probably the wallet object as they're doing creation. They're sending to Sentry, which happens to have all of the mnemonics associated with it that were just generated, also sent across the wire, which means someone either got access to their Sentry platform, or one of the Sentry guys did, or it's inside job. They haven't attributed the attack yet, but it definitely comes from a logging error within the mobile application, and probably within the JavaScript like extension as well, just based on the research that the OtterSec guys have done. And that's I was just like, it was
common.
Common. It is so incredibly common. And this is the second instance of this that we've seen in the last week, right? I know you got this email. I got the email from Slack as well.
Yeah.
Right. That most recent one.
Did I forward you the screenshot when I got it, or did I forward the email? I can't remember, but I remember being like, "Oh, here we go," because it was late at night when I got it. Maybe it wasn't super late for West Coast where they're based out of, but for us, it was it was like 9 or 10 at night, and I was like, "Oh, okay, here we go." But then when I read through it, I was like, "Oh, it's not great, but it's not as severe as I thought it might be." Do you want to describe it at all? Like what exactly happened?
Yeah, so that one, and actually I do have another article, like registers was okay here, so I'll post that one up there. I know
everybody's really surprised that, and they're like, I can't even imagine how that code looked and all that stuff. But I can tell you that, we use our ORMs, and, I think most people watching this probably are familiar with ORMs or database libraries to interact with the database from like your web app, but like in reality, a lot of these it's a direct mapping, right, of a model to a table. So for anyone who doesn't know this, you typically have that concept of models, and models have attributes on them which correspond to columns. So a model is literally a table entry in a database, and then the attributes are literally like column values that are attached to that table. And the thing is like, as you interact with those models and as you call, like, say, a logging function, it's easy to, we've talked about this before, where it was like, we've had this where we called a function incorrectly, and it was just like using quotes or not using quotes that separated basically serializing all the attributes attached to a model object instance, which just basically means like, if you have a user table and you show all of the data associated with that entry in the user table, well, you're going to see like hashed passwords, you're going to see tokens and things like that, confidential information, probably sensitive about the person or whatever. And so like when people think it's kind of uncommon, And I get with the Slack one why that's a little weird, because it's like, well, how did the model object, that specific attribute of the model object, end up being sent over a WebSocket? Like, I get the confusion there, but it's not surprising to me. That's what keeps happening is we have these model objects and you can interact them and you can call logging things. And if you just don't do it right, or even if you're doing it right and maybe you don't understand all the ramifications of how you're calling it or whatever, like, you just end up like taking something that was an object in memory and then printing it out as a string, but that string has like, it's gigantic and has all the sensitive information. So anyways, that's enough of my talking there on that.
No, and it's super interesting to actually see, because it's I mean, again, like that stuff gets logged all the time. It gets like broadcast out, like the interactions there as it goes back and forth on a WebSocket. Like, I even think it was James Kettle was like, oh, I'm having a hard time, picturing how this is happening, but I'm with you, right? Like, it was like, no, if you've seen code, if you've seen the way that we handle those objects and we, I've got an error, I'm going to actually just drop that object name right there and it gets deserialized by default and there's no restrictions on it. It just happens,
Yeah,
so
my guess
easily.
would be, I was thinking about this and I was like, well, it's when an invite link gets clicked, right? Is it, correct me if I'm wrong? It's when an invite link gets clicked.
I don't know if
And
it's when
then
it's
you,
gets clicked or created. I think it's when it's created, right?
That's
So
what I meant. Yeah. And then, but doesn't a notification, I mean, they're alerting like so-and-so is like, Slackbot will tell you like so-and-so just enter your workspace and all that stuff. And so I'm thinking like that's what happened, right? They probably just passed back some user details that the client, parses and says like, this user with this email address and this name has entered your workspace, but just like accidentally just expose more attributes in that call. So like, it sounds like it says this has been happening for years. Yeah, they've probably been like serializing the user object and sending it back so that the client can parse that information, not realizing that they're exposing over the WebSockets like all of the user attributes, not just like the ones that the client needs to parse. And that seems very simple and a very easy mistake to make, especially, when we talk about WebSockets, typically inside of a web framework. And I don't know what Slack's built. Do you know what Slack's built on? Is it Golang? Or is it something else?
No, I don't. I think it's an Electron app, man. I think it might be Node.
No, I mean like the server side.
Oh, yeah, I don't know on the server side. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, that would make a difference for sure, because some web frameworks, they have specific pieces of it for like basically specific paths within the application that just are used for WebSockets, right? And then in that case, if you are saying like, here, when this happens, give this user object over to this WebSocket. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's magic that could be happening that's already built into your web framework that you don't really realize. And when you're passing this over, you don't even know that like the WebSocket's saying like, I'm gonna provide all these details. I could be totally off the mark here. I probably am, but like that's one scenario for me that I could envision that being a real possibility.
Yeah. I mean, like who knows what it actually was. The Slack guys obviously do, but I doubt that the fix was all that complex, right? I mean, I like dealing with mobile apps and any like thick client applications, the amount of data that I see go back and forth, especially mobile, like you start looking at those React native applications and they're interacting with APIs, and those APIs expose so much data that's suppressed and not used by the front end, right? So it'd be very easy for something like a hash or a hashed password to get exposed because it probably didn't match the whatever filter that they had in place to protect sensitive data. It's either that or they are deserializing that object. I mean, there's a few different ways that it could easily slip through the cracks just based on the development that we've seen and the code reviews that we've done over the years, right? There's not.
Oh yeah.
It's not surprising to me, right? Like both of these, right? Like warmed my heart as far as like, oh yes, logging is difficult and exposure of sensitive data is difficult. So
it's not difficult to do to expose.
No,
it's actually super easy. It's and like I always feel like I have to say this, but we all share the same problems. We all go through this stuff. Mistakes happen. You can't be perfect all the time. And I appreciate it when other companies are upfront about that something happened.
Yeah.
And, in this case, it's like they're letting you know there's been a weakness for years and that, they didn't know about it. But now it's being addressed, and I don't know if that's something that could have been swept under the rug. I really don't know. But oftentimes, I'm not going to speak to this specific case, but oftentimes, yeah, it's a thing where it could be swept under the rug. But I really love and appreciate companies that are transparent about, about these things and don't just, try and cover up the fact that it happened.
Yeah, I mean, because Slack easily could have probably quashed a lot of the discussion that's going on there just by not silently patching it, because probably not a lot of people realized what was going on. But instead, they were very upfront. They came out. I mean, you and I both got that email that was like, "Hey, you need to go change your password because, even with 2FA enabled, your hash has been compromised." We don't think that anybody's had access to it, but we don't know because you can't see what's going on with those, who's actually monitoring that traffic as it flows back and forth. So, it was good that way. I mean, I feel like in the Web3 space, right? If we go back to the Slope wallet attack or the draining that happened, they're almost forced to be more upfront with what with the community because everything is in the public, right? In their case, those transfers are happening, and there was if you were watching the attack as it went on, the draining, it was just like someone was counting down the numbers and the number of wallets that were actually being affected just one at a time, because it was this slow roll of, hey, all this data, all this money is being transferred from, thousands of wallets into 2 or 3 different addresses, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know why, was the initial response. But what's also interesting is Slope did come out and say and give there's a 10% reward for return of the money, basically, right?
Yeah.
on their Twitter. They were like, if you send, whoever sends the money back to this address, right? So I
send it to not FBI at FBI.gov. And then but not to be, maybe I should say that, but it's true. Come on. I don't mean to be mean about it, but yeah.
My other question was did they use a Slope wallet, right, to actually transfer money into is one of those addresses? Because couldn't you just go drain it back? But probably not, right? But it would be entertaining if that was the case as well.
Oh my God. So to be clear, give the money back to steal both the money and the reward back. Yeah. Genius. No, look at you. Man.
No.
Wow, that's rough. That's a rough day, man. That's a rough time. So
yeah. But logging.
Yes, logging. Yeah. Logging is important. It really is, but it's easy to screw. I mean, there's that thing of you need to have a a data risk classification standard so that you can tell folks or give guidance on what is okay to externally log to external third-party services and what is not. And I mean, there's a lot that shouldn't be logged to third-party. Because there's many reasons, but one would be an easy one is those services get breached every once in a while. They just do. It happens.
Yep.
Or, I've seen this too, where just accounts that should have been purged for one reason or another haven't been purged, right? Because the employee left or whatever. And so it's still lying around. And then you have people with access to that information after they've left. Sometimes it can take a while to get caught in corporate environments. Sometimes the offboarding is not perfect. And when you think about the access that some people have, it's pretty numerous and difficult to get it all right all the time. And so beyond that, so beyond breaches, beyond accounts being left behind, there's the expectation that you don't there's certain compliance requirements and laws that you have to follow around, and privacy laws that you have to follow around what is being stored. And so sometimes it definitely gets worse if you've made a mistake and it's being logged to a third party versus something you internally manage and control. So there's another reason. I mean, I've given 3 pretty solid reasons. I don't know if you want to add to any of that.
No, I mean, I did want to dig in on that a little bit, right? Because it's a gap, right? There's a reason why identity providers have become a bigger and bigger part of the picture when it comes to corporate environments, right? So you think of something like Okta or Auth0 or any of these other identity providers, and the reason that they're so useful is that you can tie everyone's credentials to all these different servers to a single set of credentials, right? So if I log into Okta and then I have tiles to get to something like Sentry, like like your mail, everything else that's associated with that, that's great. Because when someone gets offboarded, you don't have to go to each of the different systems and each of the different applications to deactivate those accounts. But whether or not that's actually set up is dependent on organizational maturity, like realistically when it comes down to it, and whether or not they've got someone to do that sort of a setup across the board. Because every enterprise that's out there, though, like I don't care who it is, has systems that don't use those centralized mechanisms and those centralized identity providers. Maybe it's because the tech is old, right? Like some old mainframe application that requires its own separate authentication store, or maybe it's just because they haven't had the time to go through and configure it. It was onboarded quickly, right? Maybe in this case, the Sentry instance just wasn't integrated, and there was somebody old, there was an old employee, like you were saying, that got access to it. Maybe someone got phished, right? That was the other thing. If given the attack surface, right, in the Web3 space, given the payoffs that are associated with it, if I'm to attack and actually drain wallets and make $8 million, right? It may have been someone that saw that there was this flaw with the Slope wallet and then started targeting Slope employees trying to access that Sentry account or brute forcing that Sentry account. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was an insider job by Sentry or by Slope, like an employee of one of those. I wouldn't be surprised if someone was targeted in order to drain those accounts because of the payoff that can be associated with it. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, these targeted attacks against Web3 companies and their supporting infrastructure, because of the value and the ease of use of actually getting that money out in an anonymized fashion. Right? There's no clawback. There's no reversing of those funds. Unless we can figure out who owns those wallets, it's going to sit there, and who knows when they're actually going to drain or try to pull that money out. But right now, there's that money is stuck in those wallets until somebody decides to move it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm kind of ranting and going off, but those were the conversations that we were having yesterday about the Slope issue, just because it is so far reaching.
Yeah, I mean, there's numerous ways that it, like you just said, I mean, you just listed a bunch of ways that, numerous ways that, frankly, this could be, that things can go wrong. And you had touched on a little bit on IAM, a little bit about how to, like, identity providers and such. And so I did want to I dropped a link there we recently at GitHub open sourced, I say recently, it was like 2 months ago, but whatever. Recently enough, GitHub did open source entitlements, which is our way of managing access. So it supports the open LDAP schema, so you can link to your identity provider via LDAP, and then it allows you to configure basically through repositories. You can GitHub, obviously. You can manage access to resources by tying, essentially with LDAP. You have an org chart. So you've got your LDAP for identity, and you've got an org chart, and you can map to and configure repository access based off of, team membership, role, whatever. And then periodically, one thing that's really nice is you will get, typically as a manager of people, you will just get these pull requests that you have to approve, and it's basically what's called, I think on the article, or excuse me, it's either in the article or in the linked repos README, they call it audited I forget what it's called, audited access or something like that. But basically what it does is it opens up a pull request. The manager has to approve that the team or the members therein do in fact still require access, and they have to, basically attest to, yeah, you still need access to these things based off of you as the person you are, your role, your membership, whatever. And so that's considered, I think it's called strictly audited or something like that. I don't know. And then there's if you're not doing that, instead you're just saying like, hey, this team needs access to these things, then you can actually just open a PR, set it up as needed, and once approved, then pretty shortly thereafter you have the access you need. It's synchronized everywhere, so it's a really nice tool. I just want to throw that out there for anybody who's got like a smaller. I mean, I don't know if like I would assume an enterprise has their own sort of solution to this, but who knows? So, anyways,
Yeah,
pretty interesting stuff. Figure I'd throw that out there.
well, I know, as far as like from my perspective, running a small shop, right? It's a struggle because we have like 5 or 6, 7 different like providers that we use, and there's credentials across the board. There's a lot of like small kind of SaaS providers, so I'm always kind of looking for ways to improve that and ways to dip my toe into it where it doesn't like it's not overly, number one, overly engineered, so it requires a lot of time and effort, and number 2, overly expensive, right? So using something like GitHub OAuth or like SAML for for identity makes a lot of sense if the companies support that, because we're in there using it on a daily basis. We're all developers. It works pretty well. As opposed to going out and signing up for yet another service and then having to onboard all the applications. So it's helpful to have those sorts of resources available to us, even if you aren't the largest shop in the world. So.
Yeah, one of the questions that was, kind of thing that was raised was like, what happens if a manager is out, like, or if a person that's on, there's multiple approvers that can be used. I honestly don't remember the details of how that's actually configured, but you can set it up so that like you do have delegates that you can. This has happened before, like when my boss has been out, I had to it was like delegating to me to approve things, and I think vice versa even. So. Yeah, it's not like, if somebody's gonna be out for a while, like we see this a lot with paternity leave. Like usually people are out for at least a few months, with us for paternity leave. So, or maternity, but actually it's different. Maternity's, I don't remember I don't remember how long, but maternity leave happens and people are out for whatever reason. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to dig into that a little bit more, because that could be useful, for a small shop, right? Like being able to actually take away some of that time. Delegate and approve your own access. Yes, you should. If you can figure out a way to do that, submit it to the GitHub bug bounty, right? Like that would probably be the way to go.
For sure.
Let's see. What else did I have on my list? That's kind of the biggest things, right?
Sweet.
Right.
I had a question for you though.
Yeah.
Are you, because like, just a couple weeks ago, there was some massive flooding in Vegas. Do you see any of the remnants of that while you're there?
I have
just
not
all like cleaned up? No, nothing?
No, nothing. I mean, like I said, it feels a little muggy, and like a link's a little bit older, right? Some of the common spaces you can kind of smell that there might have been something that happened, right? But other than that, it looks like Vegas, right? Like they seem to have just it's all fine, right? Like party.
You and I have got to eat at Hash House the Go-Go. That's inside the link, and that place is so good. Like, if I can give one recommendation on like breakfast brunch places to eat, you should. Anytime you go to Vegas, you should definitely go to Hash House to Go-Go. Like, they have, I mean, the food's delicious. It's not just like that it's huge. That's kind of a gimmick thing, right? But the pancakes are this, like the size of a pizza. And, it's just a really good place. So I do recommend it. And it's definitely a place I want to go with you while we're there. I think you and I and David Filio might have gone before. Or maybe it was David Filio. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we went. We might have gone off strip too.
We
Or
went
we might
off
have gone
strip.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was off strip. Yeah, I remember because it had room. It had like big booths. It was off strip.
Yeah. It's funny how that works, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't.
exactly.
There was actually another one, right? Like IDOR vulnerability that popped up. IDOR is the other one we see all the time, right? But this was Portswigger was posting about it. It was actually on
Hey,
Reddit. Did you see that?
is it broken object level access still, or are we go with because everybody's still saying IDOR where I'm at? So I'm curious, like, if you've heard anybody switching to BOLA yet.
No,
Yeah,
I
neither have
haven't.
I. Okay, neither have
I
I.
mean, it is BOLA, but it's also IDOR. Like BOLA is also encompassing of MFLAC, right? Of missing function level access control. I thought
Okay.
so BOLA was the overarching name that in the new OWASP top 10, right? So let's see. Now I'm going to look it up. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that's where it's coming from. So instead of having them in separate ones, they're now under broken access control, right?
Okay.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
anyways, sorry. I'm just mostly just joking because I'm like, yeah. So many acronyms.
Yeah. Direct object. Yep. Insecure direct object reference. And yeah. I don't know. IDOR, though.
I don't know.
Whatever. We've been calling it IDOR for so long that I don't know if I can get that out of my head, even though BOLA is almost as fun to say.
IDOR just rolls off the tongue.
It's so easy, right? But that one that I posted that's from Daily Swig, right? There's a simple IDOR vuln in Reddit of all places, which and this is what I wanted to call out when it comes to IDOR. I think from an independent perspective, as a third party that assesses applications, on a weekly basis, we see IDOR in probably 90% of the applications that we test. Now, it doesn't mean that it's like as simple as it once was, where I could see every single account that's out there, that it's all enumerable, right? Like it's, account ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? It's usually now more GUID values that if I can get a hold of a GUID value, then I might be able to see somebody else's account. I may be able to perform some action as if I were that person, maybe a different organization, whatever it is, but it's usually associated with a GUID value nowadays. So it's a lot more or it's a lot harder to actually execute an attack or find the vulnerability unless you have a couple of different accounts. And this is what I suggest. If you're getting into AppSec, you're doing some penetration testing, if you're in a bug bounty program, you're running a bug bounty against someone, you want to make sure to use different accounts in order to do this authorization testing, to look for things like IDOR and broken access control. You've got to have different accounts, and sometimes even at different levels. You've got to have an admin account and a regular user account, admin account, an anonymous account, right? Like however that needs to happen, but you need to have something in each role so you can pull out those IDs and do that sort of testing. If you don't have multiple IDs, it's very hard to actually figure out what it is you should be going after, which I think is part of the reason why we do find IDOR and everything, because like it takes discipline to actually run through that, right? It's really easy to give a scanner, again, credentials, logs into a web app, does its thing, tells you about like input, output, input validation problems, maybe some XSS, it'll find SQL injection, but it's not going to find IDOR because it doesn't have that context. So, yeah, are you reading through that article, Ken?
I was actually looking at the HackerOne report because I didn't realize it was a GraphQL endpoint at first, right? So just kind of just trying to understand that context a little bit better. Which pretty interesting. I think I don't know what the moderator logs really provide in terms of. I mean, not that it's great. I mean, you got to fix it, but I don't know what it actually provides in those moderator logs, like how serious it is. They only paid out 5,000. They did call it a high. I mean, high I think is typically whatever. I won't talk about payouts. That's what they chose, and 5,000 is what they wanted to pay out. Again, I don't know how that relates to like what's inside those logs, but it is not. Again, I just hate to keep saying the same thing, but it's just not surprising, especially with GraphQL. GraphQL is a hard one to get right. Man,
It is.
I can't remember the last really good. There's been a bunch of good talks about enumerating GraphQL and then exploiting what you've enumerated, overloading calls so that it like bypasses authorization type checks. There's so much research that's still ongoing with GraphQL. It's just a hard one to get permissioning right on. And so, again, I just want to say it's.
Well, along those lines, somebody pointed out to me this crawler recently. I haven't had a chance to play with it. I haven't come across another GraphQL endpoint in testing since we discovered it. But this one's been in my back pocket, so we may as well share it since we are talking about GraphQL here. I'll throw it into but it's a good one, right? Like, from what I can tell, it's automated security testing. It pulls down the actual introspection, runs an introspection query. I think it will brute force if you don't have the introspection query available to you, and then it'll try and run through and do some of these checks that we've been talking about. Whether it is what's authorized, what's not, like turning on authorization, starting to do some of the what do you call them, where like you can chain different requests, right? Like request a person that has an address object that's then associated to a person. Like those depth queries at times can cause problems. Path enumeration, look for paths, user IDs, emails, brute force. It looked like it was a good place. Graph Finder tool.
I was admiring the ASCII art inside of GraphCrawler, on lines 47 to 52. I was just admiring it. It's pretty interesting. It looks like they do have enumeration of mutation points and just a general GraphQL schema and all that stuff. So that's cool. And they do a lot of parsing here. Reading through, so, and then I think there's other places that it gets processed once parsed. But this is cool, man. Like I definitely, there are word lists. Okay, cool. Google, wait, what is this? Google 10,000 English no swears .text.
Oh yeah, they're using that for for some of the brute forcing of the schema, right? Like they're looking for different English words that may be available, right? So, and that's using, what is it? Clairvoyance is what they call it, right? That is a different tool in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
What does clairvoyance give us, right?
Field type.
Yeah. So clairvoyance, that's an actual tool for allows us to get GraphQL API schema when introspection is disabled. So basically, it's
I've heard about this. Oh, I have heard about this. Yeah, this is. No. This is great. Like this is the one that. So I'd heard about this where it was like, even if your schema is disabled, introspection is disabled, where you can ask it to give you the schema. There's a way to brute force it, and this was the tool. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. That's dope. Like it's funny because I've been wondering like what tool was that, and awesome. Now I'm just gonna. I have it. Super sweet.
Yep. Yeah. So both. Yeah. Those are so useful. Like I said, I haven't had an opportunity to do that quite yet, right? Or to use it quite yet, because of the. I mean, just the apps that we've been looking at, like haven't had GraphQL up to this point, but there's a lot of companies out there, especially in the bug bounty space, that are using GraphQL. So having this in your back pocket as a bug bounty researcher or as a pen tester is going to pay off eventually. You should be familiar with it. You should try it out if you can. So,
absolutely.
Let's see what else. I know you have a hard stop today, so I don't want to.
No, I just because I gotta. Right? I'm a manager now.
Kent's a manager. He doesn't do technical things. Hence the reason he's not even at DEF CON, right? Like he's just.
I know. I just drink coffee and do spreadsheets and meetings and talk about synergy a lot. It's a pretty sweet gig. No, I do. Unfortunately, today I have like meetings, a lot of meetings, so kind of stacked on each other. It's one of those days. But no, it's actually been really, really fun to watch. I don't know, on another note, it's been interesting to just watch the growth since acquisition, and then watching how our teams have been built out. We were like 6 people when I joined total between AppSec and ProdSec. We combined, grew out. Now we're like 40 something people, I think, maybe more or whatever. Anyways, and then security as a whole and the company as a whole has grown, and it's just interesting being a part of that. And maybe one day I'll unpack all of the challenges and the things that we've experienced, and lessons learned kind of stuff as you go through those types of transitions, and maybe share something of value with someone. But that day is not today.
Yeah. Leisure Suit Larry. You're asking for
Lumberg. Nod to Lumberg. I love it.
Awesome. Shout out to our YouTube subscribers. We finally hit that 1K mark this last week.
Sweet. Thank you.
So we'll keep. Yeah, I mean, obviously we love doing this, so we want to do more and more content. We've got a lot of ideas. It's just a matter of time and making this work. But join Slack as well, or listen to us on Google or whatever podcast platform you want to as well. But shout out for the YouTube followers, those that watch us there. That's great. Is there anything else that you want to cover for today, Ken? I feel like if we keep going, we're going to go over your hard stop. So I don't want to push too hard against that today.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. No, just wanted to say thank you to everybody. Just reiterate what you said. Yeah. Thank you to everybody. Really, we appreciate it so much. And if, like Seth had said, I think it was the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned if you have stuff that you're like, hey, these are interesting talks that came out of the conferences, plural, or, hey, these are things that you should really be paying attention to or talking about. Don't hesitate to hit us up and let us know. You can do that in DMs. I'll be honest with you, I've been really bad, Seth, about hopefully Aaron's checking our email, because I have not been checking it. So I don't want to tell people to email us yet. I'm going to back off of that because I haven't gotten to verify that email account is actually being maintained, because like I said, I dropped off of that. But so if you DM us on Slack, though, for sure, like we'll definitely get that. Or you can hit up Ken at absoluteappsec.com or Seth at absoluteappsec.com. But again, I don't know if the info at absoluteappsec.com is the best avenue just yet. Well, we'll get that sorted. Everything's a work in progress always.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I mean, come say hi, right? Like if you're going to be around, especially on Sunday in Vegas, we'll set up camp probably in the link down at that lobby bar or whatever it is, and come around and say hi as you have time. I know there was I don't know if we have time to get into it, Ken. You were going to talk about the difference between AppSec and ProdSec, and then I dove straight into wallets. So I don't know if you want to give that a short rundown as we close things out today, or if it's a wider conversation for next episode.
The more we talk, the more I'm like, I don't even understand. But I think what we kind of came to a conclusion on is that application security does the typical activities you'd expect of application security, which is testing, threat modeling, a lot of the security into the SDLC activities. I think what we all mutually landed on, was that product security engineering tends to be more of a way of influencing engineering practices with a security bend, but not just engineering practices, but product specifically. Like a good example would be our product security team during the earlier days of my time at GitHub. Were responsible for building some of the authentication / anti-account takeover features and things of that nature, and then handing that off to engineering, as a partner, working through making sure everyone's up to speed, that the code makes sense, that long term it can be maintained by that other team, by the proper engineering team well. And so I again, going back to the product security, I think it's more of when you're actually influencing the security direction of a product / the engineering practices around the products. So I don't know if that's completely, maybe that definition will evolve, but that's, I think what we landed on as a group.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, from my perspective, that's how I've always thought about it. Right. And Neil, actually, shout out to Neil Matatal and like his path in security, right? Like he was kind of the first one that introduced that idea to me or to us back at, the fishnet days. But it's the idea that application security is assessing the security of applications, right? So I come in and I look at an application, and I'm trying to figure out how that application, what the security level is, if there are vulnerabilities or exploits that are associated with it. Whereas product security is, I am embedded with the engineering team and helping to secure the product through engineering processes, through building of code, through like, I mean, even as far as like developer training or very specific to the product itself, feels like application security is a little bit more generic and more of kind of I don't want to say a compliance effort, but definitely a check in the SDLC process. Whereas product security is earlier in my estimation and more involved with the security engineers. Now, that doesn't mean there's not some overlap, especially in smaller organizations. That application security engineers will get involved in actually building libraries and processes and pathways for product engineers or developers. But that's kind of where that line fits for me is, hey, we're kind of outside the build process as an application security team, whereas a product security team is embedded in the build process.
Yeah, and as you're talking about it, it makes me realize like maybe a lot of the AppSec stuff is temporal in nature, meaning like code's evolving and changing, and you're doing a point in time sort of set of checks and things of that nature. Like even if you're threat modeling, you're kind of looking at the overall way things have already been built and trying to find poke holes, and then that stuff evolves, and then you have different holes later. Whereas like as I'm thinking about it, you're probably right in that if you're influencing things very early, you're talking about much more resilient work. And I just don't know that feels good to say that out loud. That one is maybe more just like nihilistic, like sort of the work happens and then it goes away and then new stuff is going to pop up and you're going to tackle that. It's going to keep evolving. Whereas some of the stuff like, going back to that authentication being built in kind of, data point as an example, like, no, that's resilient. That hasn't gone away. Yep. It's evolved and gotten better, but it doesn't mean that it ever went away. It's more resilient. So anyways, that's just an epiphany I had as you were talking and listening to what you were saying. I'm like, wow, yeah, it's kind of a little sad in a way as I think about it. But anyway,
yeah, all the assessments that I do, 10 years from now, they don't matter anymore, right? Like, because they're 10 years old, right? And so it doesn't necessarily evolve. It's that point in time assessment. So it is what it is. Like both are needed in any, SDLC process. You've got to have the point in time checks. You've got to have bug bounty researchers that are involved in the application security process looking for things, but you also need a team of developers that are building security into the product. So it's all necessary. It's all part of the industry and what we do. So, well, good, Ken. We'll go ahead and close this one out, and come find us at DEF CON, find us online, and appreciate everyone listening and all the interaction today. I guess we'll just see everybody. I don't know if we're going to we'll see what happens next week. Watch our Slack channel and YouTube for the next episode. We'll get to it, probably after DEF CON and after the training.
Yeah, it might be like another Wednesday or Thursday or something like that. Cool.
Yep. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.